Now Mercedes is on a mission. It's on a mission to make its AMG range of performance cars a lot more accessible to the larger buying public. A few months ago, it got its CLA-45 AMG sedan to India, and now we have this, the GLA-45 AMG. The GLA-45 is the mad hot version of the GLA SUV that was launched in India just a few weeks ago. Let's see how much punch this one has. Like the other GLAs, the AMG is more low crossover than towering SUV. In fact, this one sits 15mm lower than the more everyday versions of the GLA. Still, what a looker! The GLA's swoopy shape has been made more aggressive with a whole host of interesting elements. The striking twin-blade grille is unique to the AMG, and coupled with the more shapely bumper gives the GLA-45 its menacing face. Other highlights include the gorgeous matte finished 19-inch rims and the scarlet calipers that shine behind them. You also can't miss how the tires just about fit in the wheel arches. There's a new diffuser at the rear too. Should you wish to further distinguish your GLA-45, you could even opt for the optional stickering on the doors. The AMG is a bit different on the inside as well. There's a sporty red and black theme in the cabin with red seat belts, contrast stitching on the dashboard and seats. Mercedes has removed the standard seats and drafted in sportier, deeper seats that can be adjusted for bolstering. They hold you really snug. Look around and you'll notice some more equipment too. Apart from all the bells and whistles in the standard GLA, this one also gets a larger infotainment screen, automatic climate control and a rear AC vent. But it's not perfect. Now, much like the standard GLA, the GLA-45 AMG is also not very generous when it comes to seating space for the rear seat occupants. Headroom is slightly limited and the cabin is also not really wide enough to host three. But you wouldn't really buy a GLA, or for that matter, a GLA with an AMG badge on it to sit in the back seat. As with every AMG, the star of the package is the engine. In the case of the GLA-45 AMG, it's a 4-cylinder 2-litre engine. Not impressed? Perhaps its 355 bhp of power might change your mind. It's the same mad turbocharged petrol engine as on the CLA-45 AMG we got some months ago. And we know there's nothing tame about it. Mercedes claims a 0 to 100 kph time of 4.8 seconds for the GLA-45, so this is a very fast car. It feels it too. There's great power right under 2000 RPM, serious punch around 3000 RPM, and then the party continues right up till 5500 RPM. Performance is really good and does justice to the AMG name. And what's an AMG without the sound? This one does well here too. Sure, the GLA-45 AMG's engine lacks that characteristic burble in the larger-hearted V8s of AMG's range, but it's still very nice and bassy at low revs, and then when you drive harder it builds into a nice strong growl. Put it into sport mode and things get better still. The exhaust starts to pop and crackle and it sounds a lot more entertaining everywhere. But sport mode isn't merely for the exhaust. It quickens up gear shifts, holds revs longer, and generally brings out the AMG bits to the fore. Now, performance is undoubtedly strong, but if there is somewhat of an issue, it would be the gearbox. In comfort mode, it feels slightly hesitant at times, and even when you try to shift using the pedals in manual mode, it doesn't always grant you a series of downshifts until the system is totally convinced that there is a need for one. The GLA-45 is also the first of the GLAs for India to get Mercedes' 4MATIC all-wheel drive system. But remember, the GLA-45 is built on Mercedes' front-wheel drive or MFA platform. Correspondingly, the GLA-45 is predominantly front-wheel drive. But the system can transfer 50% of the torque to the rear axle when needed. Expectedly then, the GLA-45 doesn't handle with the fluency of a rear-wheel drive. But is that a big issue? not really. Drive hard and you won't be able to escape the front bias of the GLA 45's all-wheel drive system. Still, for the most part, it drives like a nice tight hatchback, which is obviously a good thing. It corners flat, it corners well, confidently, grip levels are good, and there's a certain degree of playfulness built in too. So if you're on a corner and you happen to step off the throttle, the tail will do a little bit of a jig until the time the electronics kick in. That's quite entertaining. The steering is also nice, it's well weighted, and you can make it slightly more direct and more precise by tweaking the electronics. But what makes the GLA well suited to India is its ground clearance. Poor ground clearance was a complaint on the CLA 45 and you won't have any such issues here. And despite it running on 19-inch rims and a stiff suspension, ride quality isn't what you'd call bad. You can feel the firmness of the suspension, but it's not necessarily jarring. In fact, in most conditions, you tend to hear the suspension more than you feel it. Still, when you build speed, it does crash through the bumps, and you can tell that the setup is tuned more towards handling prowess rather than ride quality. Now, the GLA 45 AMG has come across as a pretty pleasant surprise. It's relatively fast, relatively furious, and great fun to drive. And if you look at it in the light of the CLA 45 AMG, it's a wee bit more practical as well. Still, this is no out-and-out sports car, but as an entry point to the AMG range, it works rather well. Mercedes hasn't announced prices just as yet, but we expect it to cost in the region of Rs 75 lakhs. For the money, it would be one of the most entertaining cars you can buy in India.